So I guess I want to start this by saying thank you to Steve, to everybody here for creating an environment where it feels safe to have this conversation. I don't think either of us can imagine giving a talk like this anywhere else, of having the psychological safety and understanding that people will be compassionate to everything that's been going on. So as Steve said, we're going to talk about dementia. It also runs on both sides of my family. 4 of my mom's 5 sisters have dementia. My grandfather on my dad's side had dementia. Those statistics don't look good. So thank you.
Maybe it's not obvious, but content warning. This is going to be a pretty frank discussion. I will use humor, maybe even slightly inappropriate, as it's my coping mechanism to get through this. But please, 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 if this makes you at all any uncomfortable, feel free to step out now or even in the middle of the talk. Absolutely no warning. I will jump in with one other thing and say, my lovely 13-year-old Jane, I know you always find my talks online. You might want to skip this one. This one's going to hit a little bit at home for you, which means she's going to watch it twice.
So as always, we're not professionals, medical, psychological. We're barely even technical professionals anymore. I've been promoted out of being technical into being management. This is just a painful experience all around. This is a story of not having any good choices, of only trying to make the least terrible decisions you possibly can. Some of these things are going to be very US-centric. We're going to talk a little bit about Medicaid. Other places are different, maybe better, maybe worse. And every relationship is unique, right? Your relationship with your friends, your family, the sufferer. I wish I could say that there's a common pattern, but these are just 2 paths through a very unpleasant experience. So, somebody you know, somebody you care about has been diagnosed with dementia. Let's talk about who this is.
Dorothy Perry is my mother. She started off being a nun, got all the way up to her final vows, and decided she wanted to be actually more progressive than that. So she dropped out and ended up leading a life of leadership ahead. You know, my mother as a senior leader, CEO in the 80s is not something that was super common for a mom. I will have to say, also the time she dropped out, she was starting to date this other Navy sailor. So if you ever gave my dad a rum and coke, he had a very different reason for why she dropped out of being a nun. But hey, that's the way it is. Unfortunately, in hindsight, about 2010, she started showing symptoms, officially diagnosed in 2013.
So Roger was my partner. Roger was fluent in 3 languages, guided massive German banks through the Euro transition, took his organic chemistry test in German. I failed mine twice in English. So I want to put that out there just because we're going to talk about what this looks like as it progresses. So let's talk about how it shows up.
Yeah, dementia is a big, big, broad category. Think cancer, right? There's a gazillion different types, technical number. You know, Alzheimer's, which I think has the biggest name, memory and executive functions. What do we mean by executive functions? That showed up with my mother, would go into the store and have a panic because she couldn't find her keys, and she'd walked out and she'd left the car running, right? Very basic things like that. Come to find out, she shopped off the same exact shopping list for about 12 months and we didn't realize it. Friends, I don't care how much you love pickles, you cannot get through that many pickles. Look, there's lots of other types. Lewy body, vascular dementia, Parkinson's dementia, early onset, which Chris can talk more about, which is kind of like that surprise, winning the worst lottery ever, where some of this stuff combines.
So like in Roger's case, we're talking early onset. Looking back, we can probably trace it to about 50 years old. I'm 53. That's kind of terrifying. And as JT said, this is the worst lottery ever. You don't usually get just one form of dementia, you get multiple forms. Lewy body is one of the forms Roger had. It involves, especially later stages, hallucinations, all sorts of muscular and visual degradation. Last couple of years, Roger couldn't sit in a chair without help. Like, he'd just miss completely, right? That's hard to watch people go through. So I'm going to do this one because I have strong opinions here, because I dealt with this family on this one. What about medicine? So we have no clue what causes dementia in any of its multitude of forms. At best, we have some correlation. If anyone's been paying attention, there has been a lot of issues around potentially falsified research that sidetracked most of the research going on for about a decade into a branch that had no relevance. So there's a special place in hell for somebody like that. There are some pharmaceutical options. They are of marginal and very dubious value. At best, they may slow the progression slightly, often at the expense of some very, very ugly side effects. Consider them very carefully, and like I said, read anything you hear in the media that loves to say, oh, we were just about to have a cure. We have been just about to have a cure for 25 years. We are no closer now than we were 25 years ago. So I wish there was an option. I can't tell you the number of times I got text messages from Roger's mom about, well, I just read this article and it looks like first off, that might have been effective 5-6 years ago. We are well past that.
I will say, as my mom progressed and was taking the drugs, we'll talk about it later. You get to have a lot of uncomfortable and hard conversations, but one of hers was one of regret for taking the medicines and slowing what was coming. And in her mind, just making it longer that she had to live with it. That's a really fucking hard conversation to have, I have to say. But yeah, there's no good choices.
So this is going to suck a lot. Right? There's no sugarcoating it. There's no positive. There's no upside. There's no getting better. Right? The number of times I would have friends, coworkers, even staff at the facility be like, oh, well, I remember having a conversation with the facility director maybe 4 months before Roger passed. And Adam said, trying to be very kind, well, sometimes people stay around longer. And I'm like, that is not a kindness, right? That is not what anyone wants now, right? And we're going to try and be as honest as we can about that. I can't imagine anything in my 53 years that has sucked anywhere close to this. That includes HIV, parents, everything. So, focus on quality, not quantity. Sometimes we think about 100 years is a success. The question is, what was that 100 years?
The most important thing you can do is focus on you. And if you're in a situation where you have kids, your kids. We'll talk about boundaries and how important that is. And unfortunately, we'll even get later in this talk where we have to talk about money and how do you protect yourself, I hate to say family, because damn it, it's my mother, but your immediate household in that situation as well. 3 things in this country we really, or I say maybe this life, I shouldn't tie it to the US, that we don't like to talk about. Mental health, aging, death, and this is that lovely parlay that covers them all.
So, let's start. You don't have to do this alone. You should not even attempt to do this alone. And yet, it will feel very lonely, right? You have to create a village of support for yourself. That means being open about things that we don't like to talk about. Anyone who follows me on social media has witnessed the last couple of years of decline. I've tried to be very open. I've tried to put content warnings on everything. That was part of my therapy, is just being able to be verbally open about what was going on. I've had great family, great friends. JT, ironically, JT knew Roger before I did.
Yeah.
They actually worked together many, many years ago. This is very strange. But no matter how many people you have in your life, you will feel alone. You will feel like you are the only person carrying this burden. I don't know how you get out of that. I wish I had an answer. Hopefully your friends stay with you and remind you. But self-care is everything. And I really, really mean this. And so many of us struggle with taking care of ourselves. It's very easy to take care of others, right? But as someone reminded me once, you can't help anybody else if you don't help yourself.
Help.
And oh boy, is the urge to fix strong, right? Early on, you go through these situations where somebody misremembers something, you want to correct them, you want to help them, right? Like you're trying so hard to help them stay in this world. And early on, it's a little frustrating, but it's okay, right? But there's this point where it actually is dangerous. It's counterproductive. You have to learn to just go with the flow. You have to learn that, sure, your mom was just here yesterday. She hasn't been here for 3 months, right? She'll be back tomorrow. She won't be back for another 2 months, right? Like, trying to correct people, one of the things that became very obvious for Roger especially, and I think this is true of most Alzheimer's patients, is frustration sends whatever residual executive function, emotional regulation is left, just wipes it out instantly, right?
Stress amplifies the moment in a negative way for them. It's a marathon. I said, hindsight, mom's first diagnosis or symptoms started showing up in 2010. We started with the diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, which is this really soft and squishy, in 2013, and it's progressed from there. Mom's probably close to the end, and we can talk about hospice and some of those things in a minute. But we don't know. And so, yeah, right? It's something you have to be in for a really, really long time.
Well, and I want to talk about just real quick about the difference between early onset.
Sorry.
Yeah. Like early onset is almost its own thing, right? Does what it says on the tin, but it's also a wild and very whiplash ride of only 3 to 5 years, right? Roger was given 5 years. He made it 6 and a little bit. But the other thing is, you can't do everything. You will want to do everything. You will feel like you should have done more. And yet, in every case, you have done more than you probably should have, right? But you still feel guilty. So, invest in Kleenexes. I don't even remember who owns Kleenex anymore. Some massive conglomerate. You're going to cry a lot. Even if you're not a crier, you're going to cry a lot. The thing that I think separates dementia from a lot of other, if not every other disease, is that you don't lose somebody once. You lose them over and over and over again. The person they were last week is not the person they are this week. You've just lost another part of them, right? It's stretched out over years, right? They're taken away bit by bit, piece by piece. I discovered that, like, around Roger, I couldn't show any emotion, or he would just completely go off the deep end. So I learned to just, like, suppress everything when I was around him. And then I would go sit in my car and cry for 20 minutes before I left the facility. But like I said, social media was an outlet. My sister was an enormous outlet. My friends, JT, others. But you have to find those outlets. You cannot do this and be fully self-contained no matter. Both my sister and I have been called hyper-resilient, right? I describe it as having the best credit rating emotionally you possibly could have, but eventually you can't refinance it anymore. And for the first time in my life, I kind of hit that point where the bank was like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. So I know you found different ways of.
Yeah, I'd yell at my cell phone. I know that sounds stupid. It happened by accident the first time after visiting mom, and my routine is when I leave mom, I text her sister. She's one of a family of 11, and several of them are still alive. Frankly, that's just my way of coping with the family community thing, but I couldn't unlock my phone for whatever stupid tears in my eyes, whatever emotion reason. And so I used to start yelling, and I yelled at my phone, and I realized after it, I felt pretty good. So now I can only imagine mom is in an adult group home, which is just a home in a residential neighborhood. I still wonder what these people think that walk their dogs by, and this guy is sitting in his pickup truck yelling at his cell phone on a weekly basis. Yeah. I do think Chris and I's text thread could be a book someday, not literally. But yeah, neither of us, or at least let me speak for myself, wouldn't even be here right now without having that outlet and somebody who won the sad lottery of on the journey at the same time. To that point, lean on friends, find fellow travelers. There are many people in this room that have texted me or Slacked me or WhatsApp or whatever and said, hey, just checking in. That's what you need. That's what this community, Chris talked about it. Come to find out we have a lot of people in common, but Chris and I never met each other till here, right? There was a number of years where Chris and I were sharing this. We live 30 miles apart, 40 miles apart, and would see each other once a year, right here, because of life happens. You have to find those people, find fellow travelers, and then I'm gonna say, find those that are not willing to travel with you or be aware of boundaries, right? Oh, that can't be that bad. Boy, there's nothing that'll trigger a reaction than somebody judging somebody else's journey on this. Hopefully for some people it's not that bad. That would be fucking wonderful. But also realizing that Chris and Roger were in a different position than mom and I were, right? That kind of thing.
And I just want to, there's nobody here from Virginia Mason, the hospital system I was working with, but I just want to say one very positive thing in this very dark time in our country. Roger and I were treated amazingly well by the hospital, by his neurologist, by the Jewish facility that he ended up moving into. They were amazing. They treated us as equals. There was never a question. In fact, we'd been going to see neurologists for 5 years before we had this conversation. They're like, oh, we don't have a power of attorney on file. Because they'd never even thought to even think about those things. So there are good things still out in the world, right?
The Alzheimer's Association is one, I will say. There is a whole network of support groups, and a support group that'll meet you where you are. Some support groups are what I would call the stereotypical, hi, I'm JT, I've been dealing with Alzheimer's since X. Some are just information sharing groups, and they also seem to be brutally honest about where that study, right? When you do get that family member that says, I just saw that new study, they think they solved it. A lot of times you can go to the Alzheimer's Association and go, hey, that's a really interesting study, but tap the brakes.
Right. And to the point I think Kat was saying, there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. Everybody's like, oh, if you just take fish oil supplements, it'll, no. Science does not say that.
Oh boy, all right. Guilt is inescapable. You are helping this person navigate that cannot anymore. And absolutely the land of less bad choices, not good choices. You are going to have to do things that are hard, but in hindsight, taking the keys away, right, from the car. You have to be the one to decide when to take some of the independence. And you have to decide when. And there's no map. There's no directions. There's no At best, it's this is what you can look for, right? The one that still bugs me to this day was my mom's dog. That was the last thing. Actually, even one care facility, she was allowed to have it for a while. And it got to the point where it was starting to become obvious she couldn't take care of this dog the way you'd want a dog taken care of, but mom would look at me and go, this is the last thing I have. This is the last choice, the last thing. The rest of my day, somebody comes and tells me when to take this pill, when to eat this food, when to take a shower. This is the last thing I have. So we did rehome the dog. Did we wait too late? Yeah. Mom couldn't remember we had rehomed the dog. And so she'd wake up every morning and I would get a phone call between 6 and 6:30 in a panic because she had lost her dog and didn't know where he was. There are no good options.
And I'll talk a little bit about that. I think when Roger moved, I questioned, did we do it too early? Could we have waited another couple of months? And there was a lovely woman in the facility, and every day, her entire day was, where am I? Who am I? Where are my kids? Why am I here? Do I need to pay for dinner? Like, how do I pay for that? Where's my room? Every day. She'd been there for 3 years. She probably has another 5 to 6 years. That's it. A life of terror and fear. You don't want that. And you're always going to be more optimistic than you really should be. Things are further along than you think. I'll just give you an example. After Roger was diagnosed, suddenly a lot of things popped into focus. Things that had happened in the past that just seemed odd. Like, well, that was weird. He's usually so organized. Why did all of that fall apart? And now all of a sudden it's like, oh. But you don't think somebody at 50 years old is going to be diagnosed with dementia. You don't have that. It's not one of the choices on the multi-choice test. So I will say family can help. My family was amazing. They can also be another burden. His family was not the most helpful all the time. I'll be very honest. Hopefully she never watches this. His mom lived in denial until probably the last 2 or 3 months. I said more than a few times, reality doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. But not everyone's going to get it, right? And self-defense, self-protection makes people do wild and crazy things, right? So you have to set your boundaries, right? And you have to protect them and hold them fiercely because no one else is going to do that for you.
Personalities will change. Not only if you're going through a 10, 15-year journey do we change, right? We learn new things, we hopefully mature. Sometimes their personalities will change dramatically. Right? In care facilities where there's multiple rooms and multiple people, I have to take one tangent. I forgot one piece of introducing my mother. She spent the last half of her career, ironically, starting memory care facilities and trying to work on making them well. She started three different hospice units, largely focused on mental care. I bring that up because of what is going to be a very, very uncomfortable thing I'm going to tell you here is they also forget they're married or they were married. And when you have multiple people in a care facility that don't necessarily remember they're married or vows to others, they still have other human urges. I can remember my mother more than once, at least in most states that I know of. Well, let me take that back. In Florida and Washington State, the care facility is required to disclose to the family if this action happens. Right? Sex, I don't know why I'm shying away from it.
We're all adults here.
We're all adults. Congratulations, Mom. I hope it was a good time. But I also know what it was like to be on, like I said, on the other end, watching my mom have to make that phone call. If it's your partner, I wish I could remove the sting of what that is, right? And hopefully they don't remember later, because that was a little bit of mom too. she'd remembered Dad shortly after and was kind of caught in this little bit of a guilt circle for a while. Right.
Well, and I remember maybe 9 months before Roger passed, we were at a neurology appointment, and the neurologist asked him, what's his name? So, they may forget who you are. They probably will not forget what you represent, right? You represent safety, right?
I know we're getting on time and we haven't even gotten to the financial piece. One other thing about they remember who you are and remember pieces about you are. 2-ish months ago, sitting with my mom, and she decided to tell me all about her son. And it was kind of cool because, hey, she kind of thought.
Sounds like a nice guy.
Except for she could still apparently remember that I ruined the Christmas of 1993 by going to boot camp on December 21st, but couldn't remember my fucking name. So, there you go. This is real, and back to my mom having done this for a while gave me and my family, my kids, the greatest gift, and that she knew we had to say goodbye. Yeah, Mike, if you had the betting pool, slide, whatever, when I lost my shit. So we have had the ability to do that multiple times. Unfortunately, not now, but it did allow me to handle a big piece of the grief process early. Obviously, I'm going to be devastated when my mother actually dies, but I've done some of the work that comes along with that already.
This is something I struggled with. I talked about being hyper-resilient. Don't lose yourself in this. This is a marathon. You have to find joy in the world. Whatever it is, that slice of cake, a cocktail, friends, an indulgent, like I love to watch the movie Clue. I know every single line. I've watched it probably 300 times. I realize it's a silly film, but it brings me joy. I probably watched it half a dozen times a month, just as a way to escape. So let's talk about the messy details, the stuff that we don't want to talk about. That's the emotions. That's the internal pain. But the messiest thing, money. This is going to cost an insane amount of money. You've got 3 options in the US. You can self-fund care if you've got the resources. Medicaid will pay. We'll talk about that. And finally, there's private long-term care insurance. A lot of it has a lot of restrictions on it. Mostly you have to sign up for it very early, like in your 30s, for it to actually still be good at that point. And we'll talk a little bit about how much that dollar figure is.
This catches some people by surprise, and I'm sorry if this does. Those of you that know my employment background can imagine how infuriating this is to me. But if you get a heart attack and you go into a facility, a hospital, and you need a nurse to keep an eye on you, to keep you safe, to give you pills at a certain amount of time, we got that. Maybe not at the level we all wish it was covered at, but covered. If you have a hip replacement and you go through there and they have to take care of you, but you can't go home because you're not safe yet, we'll help pay for a facility to keep you safe, to get your pills on time. If you get dementia, fuck you. Right? They'll cover the medicine, they'll cover the neurologist, but the place to keep you safe, the place to give you the pills, nope. Sorry.
So what does that cost?
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying. So we started with just some in-home assistance, right? 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. That was about $3,500 a month. Memory care facility, depends on where you live. Seattle is not the cheapest place, but it's also not the most expensive. $7,000 to $12,000 a month for room and board. Roger was a little over $11,000 at the start. It gets you a lot. Again, food, meals, bathing, all of that stuff. What it doesn't get you is a lot of one-on-one time. And we were very lucky. Roger is well, his friends called him the frugal crowd, right? Side little story. When we first met, he had this amazing cashmere hoodie that probably cost a fortune at some point, but it was 5 sizes too big. It had little moth holes all over it. He's like, it's still warm, I'm not giving it up. And so we got to this point, and we had the resources. We could make these choices, right? But that doesn't mean everybody can.
Yeah, despite mom's professional and good job of 401ks, IRAs, whatever, that kind of stuff, she was almost only able to private pay for about 6 years from that aspect. Medicaid is the vehicle in the United States that has kind of drew the short straw to try to cover long-term care. Okay, that varies very much state by state. That is also rapidly changing with legislation that has passed recently.
And not for the better.
And not for the better. It's not a failure. Also know you must probably, for most facilities, have to private pay for 1 to 2 years before you get to Medicaid. So it's really, really not just a pain in the ass to have this diagnosis, know it is coming, or at least the big outlines. And the first thing you can't do is give somebody a hug. You have to say, what's your money look like? Because that's a part of it. Medicaid has many, many rules. I've gotten to know with my old profession, but also my journey with Mother, that most 95% of the people working the Medicaid system, even for the state, are lovely humans who want to help you, but it is incredibly rigid because it's financially driven, not care driven. It is financially driven. You have to think very early about your parents' assets or Roger's assets, things like that. They can't just give away the money, right? Medicaid has not only do you have to be in this really cruel state of incredibly poor before you can apply for it, they're going to go back with a fine-tooth comb, and you're going to have to collect all of these statements over the past 3 years. And if mom gave a grandkid $3,000 for a college fund, they're going to want that back. Okay, I think a lot of us in the U.S., all to maybe to various degrees, kind of go into the tax season of, hey, maybe if I can write this off, right? We all have our quirks. I was talking to somebody about the agriculture property tax discount I have and stuff like that. This is not the place you want to play that game. It is incredibly black and white and zero gray, and those social workers and stuff that make these decisions have zero latitude, even if they want to. And yes, that might mean suddenly you have to take care of your parent because nobody else can. It's been a good system. One last thing, I know we're totally blowing up the time and the schedule here. One incredibly shitty thing about care facilities is that they don't like taking Medicaid because frankly, they don't get paid enough for what they do. Let me start with all of that. They can sign a contract with you that says, yes, if you private pay full board 2 years ahead of time, we'll agree to take the Medicaid. Most of them are good-natured, not all of them. If they have to call an ambulance for your parent or anything, and once they leave that care facility, they can go, hey, we're not equipped to take them back. Now, you don't have any way to private pay to get somebody else to take Medicaid. Welcome to the trap. I am lucky that we have not gone through there, but I'm lucky I knew that was a thing and I could actually get other language in a contract to try to cover some of that. Somewhere in there, you get to give them a hug, I promise, but you got to deal with all this other bullshit first.
But I will say Medicaid is, in spite of Roger's substantial assets, why we didn't get married. We'd been talking about getting married about 3 months before he was diagnosed. Done. Because I would have had to drain every penny I had as well, but I still had to keep going. So let's talk legal. Do it now. Don't do it later. You can't do it later, right? You do not want to go through the process of trying to get your mom declared legally incompetent so that you can actually do a power of attorney without them. Get a lawyer. It'll cost you $5,000. Hopefully everybody here can afford that. I know that's a lot of money, but you need somebody who really understands all the special bits and pieces you'll need to be able to make difficult decisions around medical care, around end-of-life care. Make sure the will is up to date. make sure it says what they want, right? And minor financial tip, everything you can deal with as a designated beneficiary, you should, right? 401ks, IRAs, pensions, if they can be assigned before that, none of that goes through probate, right? And then the last thing, because this was the first thing out of Roger's mouth, death with dignity, right? JT and I are lucky, we live on the West Coast. California, Oregon, and Washington State all have a death with dignity system, physician-assisted suicide, sometimes called. That is designed for people who have degenerative physical diseases. You must still be competent legally at the time to make the decision. I get it. I wish there was a navigable way through this ethically. I don't think there is. So this is a tech conference. Let's talk about tech, right?
I have to say, I know I'm going to steal your thunder. That music box you built for him is the coolest fucking thing. Okay, go.
Leverage technology broadly for yourself and them. I think technology helped us extend Roger's perception of independence, right? So, iOS shortcuts. All of his friends, his mom, there was just a big square he could tap on his iPad and it would call them. You get FaceTime, amazing technology, right? We used the brand is Skylight. It's photo frame, so friends and family would send photos all the time, right? And he'd get new photos and pictures of his niece's cats and things like that. This is a little music box I built. Roger loved music. I was sort of annoyed by the fact that he was actually at the Queen Wembley concert. He also, one of the stories I love to tell is he was in Berlin and was at a concert with the Go-Go's and spent the entire night bar hopping with the Go-Go's because he spoke English and German fluently and Russian. Music was a big deal, right? But he couldn't operate iTunes, right? So I took all of his favorite music, put it in a box, 2 big buttons, start and stop, right? It was an amazing thing. And I know you had your mom with a phone that could help.
Yeah, Raz memory phone. I try not to make product plugs, but this was pretty good. It was an Android wrapper that was specifically targeted to this world and only gave them so many buttons, and they could only cause so many problems. I will tell you, there's moments where you wish that person didn't have your number, but I do long for the days where she still could. One quirk, they are legally required to give access to 911. The phone providers and skins and all of that cannot take that away. And look, you know about elder abuse, you've heard about these things. I think it's wonderful that it's there. You will get to know your local police station and fire station for where your parent is. And you can, by the way, register and they will call you, right? And I would hate to think in an emergency they would call me first, but it literally gets to that point where they will call you and go, so, nope, it's okay, appreciate you, love you, Officer Daniels, off you going.
So, memory care facilities.
2 more slides.
I know, again, we're widely over time. Start discussing it early, find out what matters, researching early. Almost every single one will have a wait list. Some of the wait lists will be years. That's hard to think about, right? When you move them, create a familiar environment. Roger collected art everywhere he was. Literally, it was a museum gallery, right? 5 paintings high, everything covered. But also, not just art, but music, fabrics, photographs, furniture, familiar items, right? This is a traumatic experience for somebody to move. Give them things that they can feel comfortable with, but create a safe environment, right? Think ADA, right? Even if they're still fully mobile, think ADA. This was the hardest thing for me, but a friend of mine who specializes in this kind of care told me, it's like, after they move, you need to not see them for a couple of weeks. You need to give them time to establish, right, to grow into that environment, and it will kill you because you want to know. And I would call every day and check. But I would call the facility and talk to the nurses, and about 3 weeks later, I finally broke down. But there are a lot of activities. Some of them are kind of silly, but they're all very well tuned to the kind of cognitive skills of the residents. Go and participate, right? If you've got some flexibility, go to one of the, craft making things or whatever. I don't dance. Roger loved to dance. The rabbi at the facility has guilted me so many times into dancing. Because Roger, anybody knows that most men don't dance. So any man who dances is very popular with ladies. Yeah.
We've gone on this journey 5 or 6 years together,
Yeah.
and I've still yet to get a video of you dancing.
I have videos. They're just
Okay.
never leaving my phone.
Hospice. I'm incredibly biased because my mother helped start a number of the units, especially in the South. It is the first time the healthcare system works for you and the family. If you aren't familiar, hospice is where you have said, I want to shift to comfort care, not health, not lengthening, right? This is where you start to also have to make some decisions. I will say this is one of those big emotional decisions, as much as I'm a huge fan of hospice. Yes, I've known since 2013, but 9 months ago when we decided to actually make this pivot, that it was time. Shittily, you have to qualify for hospice. You have to be so close to an end before you can do this. But the system works not only for my mother, amazing care, whether it's spiritual, they helped navigate. Look, I'm a failed Catholic by far, a dropout. They helped navigate last rites and that kind of sacramental stuff for my mother with the local church. They have social workers for my kids. Hospice is as much for you as it is for the person who's undergoing the disease. A hospice is not a dementia-only thing. If you get in the unfortunate situation of you or somebody else, whether it's one of the other degenerative, deadly diseases, they can help a lot, and I would tell you to lean on them. The weight that came off my shoulders when we started using them was amazing.
Yeah, I'll say, to put it in perspective, Roger went into hospice on a Monday. Wednesday, I get a call from the doctor. We talked for 2.5 hours. When was the last time anybody talked to their doctor for 2.5 hours? Right? It was just about, what does Roger want? How does he want to be taken care of? What would he want? Right? That's something that is almost impossible to see. So this is something JT said, right? Your role is to land the plane as gracefully as possible. This requires a lot of conviction, especially at the very end. But I will just tell you, having gone through this with my mom, with Roger, it is your one shot at not having regrets. Yep. And that is the thing that will eat you up for the rest of your life.
This is the time where they're going to call you and say, even though you signed all this paperwork, you were in hospice, all this legal paperwork, your mom has a cold, do you want to treat it?
Right. You don't do flu vaccines anymore.
Right.
Right.
You don't do all of those things, like pneumonia is the dying person's best friend, right? Things like that. This is the conviction it takes, and it's hard. And we've made that decision for mom a couple times already. Anyway, we're way over time.
Yeah. So finally, and I try and remember this, the tragedy is the disease, not the ending, right? People have said Roger's death was a tragedy, and I'm like, no. The tragedy was the 3 to 5 years before that, right? That was a tragedy. Tragedy's over. Thank you.